June 18th, 2020 will be the 85th anniversary of the Battle for Ballantyne Pier. This year we wanted to do something special, kind of like we did on the 75th anniversary in 2010 when we marched from the Maritime Labor Center to New Brighton Park and unveiled the plaque commemorating the events of the Battle for Ballantyne Pier. This year, due to the COVID situation, we were unable to plan an event like that. But what we've done is we've combed through some archive footage we have of past and present ILW leaders talking about the significance of the Battle for Ballantyne Pier. They'll tell the story of what happened that day and why we continue to remember such an important day in ILWU and BC labor history. So please enjoy the video, and remember, an injury to one is an injury to all.
It started in Powell River. The longshoremen up there wanted to be unionized, I believe it was, and the employers locked them out. And of course, any pulp that was loaded by non-union workers in Powell River was refused when the barges came to Vancouver. So the employers locked everybody out, and it was a long, vicious one. Times were so much different then, and people were blackballed and never worked again.
The longshoremen in the port of Vancouver organized a demonstration or a parade that marched from their union hall, which was then at 633 East Hastings Street, down to the Ballantyne Pier. Depending on which article you read in the newspaper printed that day, there's anywhere from 1,500 people to 5,000 people. And there were met by the police, they were met by Vancouver City Police, the RCMP, and at that time there was a provincial police force, and they were also met by something known as police specials. That particular battle on that given day was lost.
The employers' tactics of trying to turn men against women, active workers against pensioners, older workers against younger workers, they're the same today as they were 75 years ago, and it's something that we should always remember. The workforce becoming more and more militant and trying to reclaim their place in society, that the people weren't just for the scrap heap because there were few jobs around, and people started to respect labor and demand respect for their labor.
Those fellas that walked in 35 weren't just walking for themselves or their jobs, but they had foresight and vision for the future, and they were fighting for their families, their kids' rights to work.
When I was in office in 1966, I was still arguing with employers to get all that time credited for pensions and vacations, and was successful. We got an awful lot of people reinstated for their whole time, even though they were blackballed by the employers.
There was a lot of talk then about 35ers. People used to say, this guy's a 35er. I had never had a clue what that meant. And eventually found out it was a longshoreman who had went to work in 1935 after the strike was broke, or during the strike, wherever he went. And they didn't have much respect. I thought about those days with all those people walking through there, and I thought about how bad it must have been with no food for your family and no job, nothing to look forward to in those days. The war hadn't started yet, of course, and everybody was in pretty bad shape, and I thought how bad it must have been for some of those guys who believed actually in unions, who actually did go through the picket lines or worked behind the lines in those days. And over the years, they had eventually become union members, and some of them become very, very good union members and really believed in the union. And I thought to myself how bad it must have been for them to be called 35ers after what they went through. And we have to show some compassion in the unions for people who have had to go through those things. And no one likes what we call a scab, and certainly not the ILWU.
There was tear gas thrown against the crowd. They ran at them with batons on horses. They had 2 machine guns in boxcars on the boxcar siding. A couple of the demonstrators, and I'll just call them demonstrators right now, but a couple of them were shot. 2 of them were shot by sawed-off shotguns by the police in the back. Both of them were shot in the back. There were over 100 of the so-called demonstrators hurt, injured, went to the hospital. There were 41 police also injured that were also treated at the hospital and the Vancouver City Morgue. In the overall event, there was over 500 people arrested for all kinds of different charges, but that day I think there was only about 36. The demonstration was broken. It was scattered all over. It got put back together sometime later. Other organizations got formed, other unions got formed, many other unions got formed. Ended up in the 1940s with a solid organization that has existed ever since.
Once we really understand that good union feeling, get that good solid feeling of solidarity, when the union's inspiration through the workers' blood shall run.
June 18th, 2020 will be the 85th anniversary of the Battle for Ballantyne Pier. And there's a fucking woodpecker